Hello, I am Bryla McNees, dietitian with the UK Health and Wellness Program. Welcome to this month's edition of Eating with Intention. This month we're talking about diffusing social pressure to eat. For those of you who are here with me live, do you guys feel like the upcoming holidays are a time when you will have to deal with social pressure to eat? This is why I timed the topic when I did. I do think social pressure to eat is always with us, no matter what time of year it is, holidays or not. But I do feel like holidays in November and December really um, make this feeling much more intense for a lot of people. Let's see here, your comments. Oh, yeah. Okay, we've got, especially at the office. Yes, I think for a lot of people, that's where most of it happens. Pressure to drink too, Rachel. That is a very good point. Yes, very good point. Well, I don't mention that specifically the drinking in this presentation, but I am going to assume that most of the strategies we're going to talk about with food could be applied to alcohol as well. Okay. Oh, home and the office. Yeah, sometimes it does feel like it's on all fronts as well. Okay. Well, I'm sorry to say that's what you guys are anticipating for the holidays, but that again is why we're talking about this now. And I do want to be sure that we arm you with the right mindset and some strategies to help you navigate all of that. And still enjoy the holidays. That's the whole point, right? Of trying to balance all of that. But it can be hard to enjoy things when you're feeling that pressure. I am going to make a plug for next month because next month's Nutrition Without Noise, which will be the first week in December, is going to talk specifically about holiday eating strategies. So today we're focusing more on kind of this social pressure aspect. But if you want nuts and bolts tips about how to navigate all the potlucks and buffets and parties and all of that, of just in terms of like how to manage your food intake, that's what I'm going to be talking about the first week in December. So be sure you sign up for that if you're interested in getting that information. Okay, so it'll be a great companion to what we're talking about today. All right. Let's first talk about why social pressure happens. Okay. I mean, always having an understanding and coming from a perspective of, I know of feeling like, okay, there's reasons this happens. Okay. And that it can make us a little bit more tolerant of it when it does happen. Obviously, there's a lot of social norms and tradition involved that, you know, socializing often occurs around food, not just in our culture, but cultures all around the world. And because of that, eating becomes an expected behavior. That, even though you're all there gathered together, if you're not eating, you're still not kind of part of the socializing is sometimes the perception. And if you're at an event where there's a host, perhaps the host you may feel is equating your enjoyment with eating, or how appreciative you are of their efforts by whether you're eating or how much you're eating. Okay. Um, there's also cultural messaging, right? So sharing food is how we show affection, okay? It's how we show our care and concern and love for other people. And so sometimes declining food can feel like you are rejecting that from the person offering the food. Family dynamics. I think some of you mentioned family is certainly a source of pressure. But there are long-standing habits or traditions that families have centered around food, again, where that just comes with certain expectations of participation. Food is used as connection, again, like we said, in affection. And so, again, refusal, especially in a family situation, may feel very personal. And then finally, there's self-imposed pressure, right? That just within ourselves, right? We might be, feeling like we want to fit in or avoid awkwardness in these social situations by not eating. Again, because we're afraid of all the things we just mentioned. And again, that fear of appearing rude or ungrateful or like, you're the one on a diet or something and can't eat what everybody else is eating, right? We don't want to be different. We want to be part of the group. That's part of what this, kind of socializing around food is all about. I will say too, with these other categories, the social norms, the cultural messaging, the family dynamics, those are all real influences and I think sources of pressure. But sometimes we do assume that that is the case for a certain situation when maybe it's not. So, you may feel like eating is an expected behavior, but is that really true of the situation you're in or the group of people you're in? And so I do think it's important to take it on a case by case basis, because every situation is a little different. And also to really challenge yourself of like, is this the reality of it? Or is this just my perception of what's going on here and where this pressure is coming from? So sometimes I do feel like this pressure, the feeling of it is a bit kind of self-manufactured, if you will. Okay. And we just want to be careful of that too, to just really check in with ourselves and assess the situation and try to be as realistic about what's going on as possible. Okay. I just find often sometimes we ourselves are more of a source of pressure than anyone else around us actually might be sometimes. And so just be on the lookout for that. Okay. But it does have real consequences. Okay. Especially if we find that we are giving in to this pressure fairly frequently, which again, holiday time is a perfect storm for that to be happening, where there's lots of things revolving around food and feeling lots of pressure to eat. The one thing, of course, that this may affect is kind of our body awareness and honoring our body's wants and needs, right? Because if we're making food decisions based on these external factors of what we think we need to do in a certain situation or what people expect from us, we're going to ignore our body's internal wisdom, right? About our hunger and fullness cues and the types of foods it really wants to eat or not eat, and we're going to be disconnected from our bodies. And I think for a lot of us, this is something we're always trying to work on improving, right? We've addressed some of this in some of these eating with intention topics. So this can really interfere with those efforts. Of course, social pressure can lead to just straight up overeating, eating more than you intended to, maybe eating foods that you didn't really want to eat because maybe you were thinking they might not sit well with you. And so that can be, there can be just some discomfort there. You can get some actual physical symptoms, maybe some GI symptoms, like some, again, just that distended kind of feeling of overeating. Maybe there's some acid reflux situations. Maybe you feel kind of sluggish or tired, low energy afterwards. Maybe it disrupts your sleep. So, there could be some real consequences to overeating and maybe overeating, you know, some of the types of foods that can lead to these symptoms. Increased guilt or frustration. I think this is going to be a big one for a lot of people, right? Of just feeling like you've been pushed into choices that you didn't want, can certainly trigger those feelings of, regret, guilt, shame, self-criticism, just general frustration with yourself and the situation that you're in. And, when we're already in that negative mindset, it makes it more likely that we're going to succumb to the pressure the next time around. Okay. So we want to also, think about this loss of autonomy. And I think that's where a lot of that guilt and frustration come from, is that you feel like you have lost your autonomy. I think these things are definitely related. That if you feel like you're, deferring to other people's expectations and ignoring your own, again, wants and needs, then you feel like you've put yourself, second, or maybe sometimes third or fourth, especially around the holiday season, right? But yeah, that loss of autonomy and feeling like you don't have control over your own choices is really very, very frustrating. And then finally, stress and social exhaustion, right? I mean, if this is happening repeatedly within a few weeks, period of time, then these gatherings are gonna feel less enjoyable. You might have some anticipatory stress around future eating events. Maybe you just avoid them because you don't want to deal with that. And I've heard that from a lot of clients. Like, boy, I'd really love to socialize with my coworkers and be part of it, but the pressure to eat is just so overwhelming that I just don't want to deal with it and I avoid it. And so we want to be sure that people still feel like they can be part of the social aspects of these get-togethers without having that feeling around the food. Anything else you guys would add to this list about how that pressure affects you? Okay. It just feels yucky. That's the best way to put it. Just feels yucky. And it can feel yucky physically and mentally, right? Okay. So before we move into some strategies for dealing with this social pressure to eat, I do want to just share these important points. I think these are kind of big picture thoughts to keep in mind, okay, to frame all of this going in. I do think it's quite important to remember that social pressure to eat, it is common, okay? We should probably expect it in most situations, but it's often unintentional. Okay. And again, sometimes it's of our own making. Maybe there's not really a pressure there, but we're perceiving that there is, or we've created it in our own minds. Okay. But if there really is pressure to eat, it's not because people are trying to be mean. It's not like they are trying to sabotage your good intentions. That's not typically where it comes from. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some situations where that happens, but for the most part, it is not intentional and it is not mean-spirited. And I do think it helps to remember that because it helps us maybe not be quite as defensive or ill-willed towards people who may be pressuring us to eat. You can honor relationships and traditions without sacrificing your wants and needs. Okay. And that's what these strategies are all about to help you find that balance. And I think a theme you're going to see as well is that boundaries, because this is really what this is about, right? Managing social pressure to eat is really about creating boundaries. And how do we do that? And how do we do that in a, socially acceptable way? But boundaries that are presented calmly and confidently are usually respected. And we're going to, again, talk in more detail about that. But I do think these are big picture things to keep in mind, a way to frame all of this so that you can kind of go in with the right mindset. Speaking of mindset, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Okay, so let's look at some specific strategies. Like I said, checking your mindset before you even enter into any of these situations, I think is really important. Step number one. Okay. How are you thinking about this? How are you going to, you know, um, perceive the situation? Okay. What is, how are you going to mentally prepare yourself? Okay. The first thing you might want to do is connect with your why. There's a reason you guys are all here today listening to, social pressure to eat, right? Because you have some concerns about it. You reasonably anticipate that's going to happen and you don't want it to happen. That's why you're here to learn, right? Why is it that you don't want that to happen? Why don't you want to feel socially pressured into eating? Why is it important to you that you set boundaries for yourself? And I think it's important to ask yourself those questions and connect with that why. What are kind of like the overarching goals and intentions you have for yourself and your well-being that makes it this important to you. And if we can connect with those bigger whys, that can give us a little bit more kind of motivation moving forward to follow through with these strategies. I kind of already alluded to it, but I'm going to say it a different way. Give the benefit of the doubt. Like I said, while it can be easy to feel otherwise, most social pressure is not malicious. Okay. I do believe most of it truly comes from a good place, right? Where people are really just trying to show affection through food or trying to help people enjoy an event. I will tell you this example or this story. I, for the last several years, have hosted Thanksgiving at my house, and it's a small get together. It's my in-laws and then my sister-in-law, her husband, and my two nephews, plus my husband and two children. And, I make a good amount of food. I probably overmake food like most people do because I'm afraid people are not going to have enough to eat, but there's always too much. Um, but, we kind of just put it all out on the counter and everybody kind of serves themselves and then sits at the table. And when I noticed that for the first year or two, when I noticed that everybody was kind of done eating, I would actually say like, hey, there's plenty of food here if anybody wants more. And I realized, like, oh no, like that's a form of pressure, really. I didn't mean it that way. I just meant like, hey, don't be shy. Like, there is plenty of food. Like, please. But they knew that. They don't need me to tell them that, right? They know there's more food and they can eat it, but it was just me saying it out loud was like this way of showing again my affection or concern that, people didn't have enough to eat or were afraid to get more or something. So even the dietitian was guilty of being part of the social pressure. But again, I know it came from a good place, but I really had to stop myself in, subsequent years. And I'm always tempted to say something like that, but I have stopped myself now because I understand how that may sound to people. Avoid being defensive. All right. Kind of already mentioned this too, but I think it's very easy to feel defensive if somebody pushes back on a decision or choice you're trying to make, right? If you're trying to say, oh no, I'm good right now, I'm full, I don't need any more food. Someone pushes back, I think the automatic reaction is to feel defensive or feel that we need to explain our choices. And we don't need to do that, okay? You definitely don't need, again, you can't, maybe that feeling of defensiveness is instinctive. Um, and that's okay, but just recognize it for what it is. But the feeling the need to explain yourself is something you can prevent and not do. There's just no need for that. You just put yourself in a more vulnerable position. You give people more information to work with to be able to kind of like debate you or argue with you or push back even more. Not to mention, you don't need to feel like you need to reveal anything about yourself or your health goals or what you're doing just because you don't want to eat something. So please try not to fall into the trap of feeling like you need to explain. I know it's very tempting, but I tend to think it often does more harm than good in that situation. Act instead of react. So again, there might be some really strong feelings going on. Maybe that feeling of defensiveness, right? If someone's challenging a decision you've already made or a choice you've already stated, there can be those strong emotions. There can be feeling defensiveness. There can be feeling, again, feeling like you're not giving the benefit of the doubt. You might feel like, what the heck is this person doing? Why are they trying to sabotage me? Or why are they being such a jerk, right? So you might have some strong negative emotions. And if you feel those, trying to take a pause. We talked about a mental pause. Look at how all of this works together. Didn't we talk about that last month? How to take a mental pause? Maybe go back and review that, but that would be really helpful in a lot of these situations, okay? Because they are fraught with emotion because they are dealing with people and people's feelings and your connections with them, okay? Of course. So if you feel these emotions, really trying to take a pause before you respond or act. Because in that moment, if you respond or act right away, you're probably reacting. And we want to act. We want to act with intention. Okay. We want to act not from our emotional brain, but more from our rational brain. And if we can take a pause, it allows us to do that. Use humor. I always find that this is an excellent way to diffuse tension or negative emotions, and it can also deflect attention away from, your eating. Okay. So trying to keep it lighthearted and trying to make a joke if you can, is definitely something I would encourage when you can. And finally, taking responsibility. This is part of the mindset that at the end of the day, you're the only one putting food in your mouth. And we do have to kind of accept that responsibility, right? For better or for worse. Whether you've put food in your mouth or you haven't, you are the one who did it. And, we got to take responsibility for that. Okay, so that's the mindset, right? We want to tap into all of this as much as we can before we enter into these events, right? That involve people and food. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is maybe think through a game plan, right? So you've got your get your mind in the right place, but now you want to think through like some actual things you can do. Be proactive, right? Think through the challenges you are likely to encounter. So I do think, like I said, a lot of this stuff with the pressure is very situation specific. It depends on, maybe some events you go to at certain places with certain people are not an issue. Maybe other ones are more problematic. So thinking through each event, thinking through what challenges you're likely to encounter, maybe even thinking about who is likely to be giving you pressure, right? Or with what food you're likely to feel pressure to eat, right? I think a lot of these things we have some experience with and can anticipate, right? It's not like we're going in completely blind to a lot of these situations. We have some idea of what to expect, right? So let's use that to our advantage to brainstorm some possible strategies ahead of time. All right. How am I going to handle this person? What can I say to them? Or what am I going to do when this food is offered to me? And just start thinking through it. Having a script, we are going to look at some very specific phrases you can use for different types of these situations. So we're going to save that for the end. You'll have that. But maybe pick a few of those phrases and keep them in mind. Maybe rehearse them, commit them to memory, so that they are kind of at the tip of your tongue when you need them, right? In front in your mind, when you need to call on these phrases, when you're feeling that pressure. I read this tip. I thought it was really interesting that maybe think about, looking like you're partaking when you're at these events. That maybe if you keep a drink in your hand or a small plate in your hand, it looks like you have something. And so people are less likely to approach you and say, "Hey, you don't have anything. Can I get you something?" I thought that was actually pretty clever. This might be more of a dramatic situation, but I really do see how this could be helpful. Maybe if you don't even have anything on your plate or in your cup, just looking like you've had something, might be quite helpful. And then finally, don't arrive famished. We talked about grocery shopping at some point. Don't go grocery shopping hungry. It's the same kind of thing. All right. Your ability to make rational food decisions is severely jeopardized when you are really, really hungry. Okay. So whether it's grocery shopping or dealing with pressure to eat at a holiday event, same idea. Okay. So please go with a little food in your stomach where you're not feeling, hangry or like you're just going to eat the first thing that you see when you get there. Okay. It helps you feel a little bit more in control. Okay. This is really interesting to me. This is kind of a new concept to me as I was researching this for this presentation. But this idea of normalizing your choices, and it's really kind of a framework. Of how you want to try to present your choices in these situations. And it kind of has like four hallmarks, right, of what this means. So let's walk through these, and I think you'll get the idea. So keeping a casual tone. All right. So if you speak as if your choice is completely ordinary, right? It's not a big deal. It's not something to justify. Um, that is going to help it feel normal, just like anything of like where you choose to sit when you go to a party or what what clothes you're wearing that day is just one of many choices you make in a day and it's completely ordinary. So trying not to make a big deal out of it, of just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna skip that for right now, if someone's offering you a food or whatever. But just whatever the choice is regarding the food, just making it sound normal. Okay. Even if you think maybe other people will think it's weird, if you present it as completely ordinary and normal, less likely you're going to get pushback. But if your tone is overly serious or apologetic, of like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to eat that," then that kind of raises some suspicions, right? People maybe sense some uncertainty or tension there, or that this is now it's a little bit more emotionally charged or something. And so you're just bringing kind of more attention to the choice and making it sound like something that's again much bigger of a deal. Now, again, maybe in your mind, it is a big deal to have decided to do this thing, but you don't need to communicate that to other people. You want to make it sound like this is totally normal. I do this all the time. Everybody does this all the time. Okay. That's kind of the tone we're going for. You also, like we've already mentioned, want to be non-explanatory. You do not need to justify your choice with any details. Okay. You just don't. And the more explanation you give, the more material there is for people to comment on or debate about. It's just going to give you them more ammunition to push back on your choice. So don't give them that, okay? And again, I do feel like there's a little bit of that. Remember that loss of autonomy we were talking about? I think sometimes there's a little loss of autonomy by feeling like you have to justify something or explain something to other people. Especially, these a lot of these are private choices for private reasons, and you do not need to feel like you need to violate that just to not eat something. Okay. You want to ensure that there's no implied criticism. It's very easy to have that happen unintentionally, but you want to make sure that your words and tone don't suggest that other people's choices are wrong, unhealthy, or inferior. Maybe somebody's offering you cake and you say, "Oh man, I'm too full for cake right now. I'm good. Thank you. Maybe later." No implied criticism. But maybe you say something like, "Oh man, I can't be eating all that sugar, after I eat this other food." Well, now that sounds like you're judging people who are eating cake after they ate all that other food, okay? And that's not what you want. So making sure there's just no hint of judgment there, because that will make other people feel uncomfortable or defensive. Oh, Trish, as a vegetarian, you have had to deal with people questioning your meals all your life. Well, I am sorry to hear that, although you're probably an expert. And so if you have any other suggestions that are not being mentioned in this presentation, please feel free to share them in the chat box with everybody else. Or if maybe you have some go-to phrases that you find really effective, please share those. The whole idea of this normalization is that it reduces follow-up pressure. When your decision sounds normal and people don't feel the need to question it or persuade you, right? That calm, matter-of-fact tone is hopefully going to signal that this isn't up for debate. Okay. So I think this is a really great framework to work within as you kind of figure out kind of how you're going to handle these situations of pressure. Being polite but firm. I think this is really important to people. You want to sound polite. You don't want to sound rude, okay, like we said, or unappreciative of the effort somebody has made. But you do need to be firm. Again, this is part of maintaining the boundaries for ourselves. So trying to stick with short, neutral phrases. We're going to look at some more of those that you'll have. But, everything looks great, but I'm good for now. Yeah, no explanation, no anything like that. Just, again, short and sweet. Stand your ground. Repeat your initial statement if you're pushed. And again, really try to avoid becoming defensive or over explaining. Okay? We already talked about the importance of trying not to do those things. You don't want to be put kind of on, the defense. You want to stay on offense. If you're a sports person, right? Maybe that analogy makes sense for you. Try one bite. I take this piece of advice with, you know, some caution. I do often find that if I feel like it's really important to be able to try something and tell someone I enjoyed it, all I need to do is take one bite. Now, again, maybe you're not comfortable with that either, and that's okay. But I do find that this can be a legitimate strategy, right? Of like, oh yeah, I tried that, and now I'm not lying. I don't want to do that. But I say, yeah, oh yeah, I did try your casserole. It was delicious, right? It takes one bite to enjoy it. Okay, so if you really feel like that would be an appropriate strategy, that's okay. You don't have to eat a whole plate of it to be able to tell someone, yeah, I tried it and it was really good. I liked it. Okay. And then take it for later. This is classic. Love this one. This allows you to show interest in the food, but does not obligate you to eat it. Oh yeah, can I take some of that for later? Right? I'm too full now, but I'd love to try that later. Maybe you try it later, maybe you don't. Maybe you throw it away. Maybe you try a bite, like, I don't like it, whatever. Not gonna eat it. But then you can decide later when it's not in kind of like the heat of the moment, right? But you're still showing interest in taking the food from somebody. That is also an option. I often thank them for their concern, just let them know that yes, I do get enough protein and joke. They sneak it in everything. Oh, that's funny. See? Using the humor like we talked about. That's a great point, Trish. Thanks for sharing that. Okay. And then a few other strategies. Maybe trying to use non-food validation for hosts. So, I mean, again, a host certainly where there's food involved is you know, has put a lot of effort into that, but you can complement other things, right? Such as, wow, you really put a lot of effort into preparing all this food, or oh, your spread looks beautiful, or your charcuterie board is so cute. Things like that. You could talk about the atmosphere, like the decorations or whatever, or again, just thanking them for their effort and noticing that instead of accepting more food. Those are all ways to kind of validate, a host's effort and, affection um, without eating. Offer to help with hosting tasks. I love doing this. This is a way to distract from the food, to not have the pressure to eat, and still show appreciation by actually helping. Like, oh, can I help you, take out the trash or pick up some of these dirty dishes or wash these things or replenish the chip bowls or whatever, which does involve food. But again, offering to help the host keeps you busy and also shows gratitude to them. Change the topic. So being ready to shift a conversation away from food. And again, we're going to give you a few ideas for that at the end here. But yeah, be ready with a couple things you could switch to if people really start talking about food or start talking about dieting or weight loss or all those other things. Be the one who can steer the conversation to something different. Enlist support. Maybe let a partner or friend or coworker, whoever's going to be around, let them know your plan of what you're trying to do, right? So maybe they can help steer conversations or maybe kind of be just like a moral support buddy for you if you're getting that pressure. Maybe they can jump in with like some humor and diffuse it or change the conversation or something. But again, having someone who's in on what you're trying to do, I guarantee you there's a lot of other people who are trying to do the same thing. So maybe you can find someone like that and you can kind of be trying to do the same things together. And also sharing your needs, right? People are not mind readers, not even the people closest to us. You have to tell them what you need, okay? So no one can support you if you don't tell them what you need. So think about where it might be appropriate to share with somebody like, this is what I need from you. This is how you can help me through these situations, and tell them that very explicitly. Okay, so I'm going to just leave you with these last couple slides because we are already over our time. But I want you to have these suggested phrases for when you feel pressured. And there are 8 of them altogether here for different situations. When someone offers more food, when a host pushes a special dish, when someone says you barely ate anything, when someone says they made it just for you, when you want to compliment without taking more food, when you need a firmer boundary, when you want to normalize your choice, and when you want to redirect. So all those situations we talked about, there is some suggested language here of how you can respond to those. So I hope that's helpful. And again, like I said, that's part of preparing for these events. Maybe pick a couple of these phrases, right, and responses to have in mind. Oh yeah, here, Alina, let me go back. Here's this slide. And you guys are going to get this. So remember, I'm going to send a recap email tomorrow, and you will get this recorded video and you will get this PDF. All right. So you will have everything here too. Yeah. And here's that second slide again. You're welcome. All right. I do hope this was helpful. Do you guys have any other thoughts, comments on this? Rachel. Let's see. Oh no, who's saying this? Let's see. VTFA, like you're reflecting of past mistakes. Thank you. Self-awareness, very important. Pausing and analyzing self for more self-centered control. Good. Yeah, and like I said, maybe go back and review last month's presentation about mental pauses. That might be an especially helpful tool for some of these situations. Rachel is a vegetarian. I do try to mention my diet to the host in advance of the event if you can. Yeah, I think that's good to keep in mind, right? That if it's appropriate, right, to mention it ahead of time, do so. And then there's no surprises when you show up either, right? Where then now the host feels bad that there's nothing there you can eat or, something like that, right? So it's kind of a win-win, it seems to do that. Good idea, Rachel. And that could hold for any dietary needs, right? Maybe not just being vegetarian, but maybe you have a celiac or a severe food allergy people need to know about. That would all be certainly within the realm of reasonable to give a heads up. All right. Well, thank you guys for being here today. If I don't see you, okay, next week is Lazy Dietitian. We're going to talk about lazy potluck foods, ideas for that, because again, lots of holiday get-togethers where you're expected to bring something. So we'll talk about some real lazy ideas for that. But if I don't see you then, I do wish you a very happy Thanksgiving, and I'll hope to see you for some of our events in December. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.